tens of thousands of people got arrested, killed, etc. My dad was one of the people who got put in a concentration camp. And then he was lucky enough to be released alive and actually not tortured because they tortured a bunch of people there.
Hmm.
And then we ended up being in a refugee facility for some time, just in no man's land, right? So no no understanding of the future, what the future holds. And we were basically exiles. Ended up in Germany, then Russia again, then Africa. So I changed four countries by age 7.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Christian Ray Flores is a high-performance coach, entrepreneur, international recording artist, and philanthropist with a story that spans continents and industries. From a childhood as a refugee in Chile to becoming a pop star in Eastern Europe, launching award-winning media ventures and leading global philanthropy, his journey is a masterclass in resilience, reinvention, and impact. With a master's in economics and fluency in 4 languages, Christian has built and advised startups, raised millions for businesses and missions, and coached top executives, founders, and creatives to sustained peak performance. He co-founded Third Drive Media, producing content that moves audiences and fuels innovation, and leads Exponential, where he empowers high achievers to maximize success and significance. As host of the Headspace by Christian Ray Flores podcast and author of Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America, he speaks globally on leadership, mindset, and the habits that create extraordinary lives. Before we hear about Christian's journey from refugee to pop star to entrepreneur and philanthropist, I want to share a little about the Warrior Words merchandise on Fourth Wall. So you can wear your warrior wings or carry your warrior sword wherever you go. And if you pick something up, post it on Instagram and tag me at @mywarriorwords. Now grab a tissue and join Christian and me as we talk about his incredible journey. Let's rock. Welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Christian. How are you today?
Heather, thank you for having me. I am wonderful. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you very much. I was looking at your website and looking at your story, and your story spans so much.
Yeah.
From I believe it was Chile and the Soviet Union and here in America. So,
and Africa, yeah.
And Africa, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you could start with, those difficult traumatic beginnings way back in Chile.
In Chile. So yes, so basically the chain of trauma, I guess.
Yes.
I was a baby when we moved to Chile from Russia. I was born in Moscow. My mom is Russian, my dad's Chilean. And then I was 5 years old when there was a military coup there. And it was like terrible. Tens of thousands of people got arrested, killed, etc. And my dad was one of the people who got put in a concentration camp. And then he was lucky enough to be released alive and actually not tortured because they tortured a bunch of people there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we ended up being in a refugee facility for some time, just in no man's land, right? So no understanding of the future, what the future holds. And we were basically exiles. Ended up in Germany, then Russia again, then Africa. So I changed four countries by age 7.
Oh, wow.
And like a year into, and it's one of the poorest countries in the world, Mozambique. It's South East Africa, and about a year in was this there was a civil war there as well. It was mostly up north, but we got bombings and all kinds of things like that.
Mm,
So there's just a lot of that instability, poverty. My parents got divorced. I was back in the Soviet Union by age 14, and we were sort of in very humble circumstances, let's put it that way. I slept in the
right.
kitchen for a few years, single
Yeah.
raised by a single mom in the Soviet Union. So that's sort of there was like a chain of things that happened that were difficult. So that's my trauma story, I guess.
Well, when you say you lived in, I think it was seven different or
There's,
multiple countries in
yeah,
7 years, I used to always joke that I had lived in, I think it is 12 different states or 12
right.
different
Yeah,
locations
similar.
while
Yeah.
before I was 6 years old, because I'm the daughter of a United States Navy man. And
Hmm.
so, but the circumstances are vastly different. But at least I can definitely relate to the moving around and
Right.
a tiny bit of the
Yeah,
uncertainty.
starting over, of course. Yeah. Hmm.
Right. And as a young child, you don't, the stability thing, the friendships,
Yeah.
am I going to have to move? Am I going to have to do this or that? And so there's a lot of questions with that. But you, after you came back to the Soviet Union, you ended up in Russia. You ended up having, I guess, a change. You became
Yeah.
very successful there.
Yes, I went to college, and then the other last sort of civil unrest thing that happened to me,
Mhm.
it seems to follow me around, was the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I was there when it did.
Oh,
And I was on
wow.
my last year of college, and basically it was just this everything changed. And it was bad and good, and bad in the sense that there was massive economic instability, poverty, and crime, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
Just tanks in the streets. There was an attempted coup there as well, but in good in the sense that it was all of a sudden free, so you can attempt things, and if you were lucky and fortunate and worked hard, you could actually get something done. So instead of going into economics, I have a master's in economics, into academia or business. I
Hmm.
was musical all my life, and I just said, "Yeah, I'm in my 20s. I'm going to try music." And I was very successful as one of the top artists in all of that whole post-Soviet space, about 15 different countries.
Oh,
So things
wow.
changed dramatically, obviously, for the refugee boy, right, who was
Right.
dark-skinned and arrived in Russia, essentially as a minority, and with a strange accent, all of that.
Well, what kind of music did you end up doing?
I did a pop, R&B pop, basically. So it was dance music. It was very optimistic, basically, which was a change for Russia. I stood out. I stood out. There was a need, there was a hunger for Western sounded music because the country had just opened up.
Hmm.
And I just happened to have grown up all over the world. So I had a lot of those sort of Western vibes, influences. I was a good dancer, a good songwriter, singer, and I looked exotic. So for the stage, it was exotic. It was so funny how there's like you're one step away from being a minority who girls won't date because you have dark skin, to being exotic and a sex symbol. Like it's so hilarious that the same person could be those two things depending on the
Yes.
circumstances. Yeah. So
Yes. I did experience that at one point when I had a person in my life who was a bit on the racist side and would never be interested in me dating someone outside of my race until I dated a player in the NFL.
yeah,
And, and
exactly.
and that was and then it was okay.
That was okay. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
okay. So yeah, it's very interesting because I think it's about perspective. It's just, you look
Yeah.
at things, through different lenses. And we've talked about that a lot on this podcast about just how we look at things. But I found it interesting because a majority of my audience is here in the United States. And but it is international. So I've seen that I have listeners in Russia, and I do actually have a few listeners that have listened in Chile. And it's just it's just interesting to me because a majority of my listeners being in the United States most likely have never lived through anything like what you are describing.
Well, hopefully not, and that's a beautiful thing. They're lucky.
Well, but I think but going back to that perspective, it's important, I think, for us to know about it and to learn about it because otherwise we end up making the same mistakes, whether it's on a personal level or whether it's on a governmental level.
Oh,
I
I
think
think
we,
so. Yeah, I mean, learning from history is a big deal, and learning from other people's experiences, it's a super important thing, of course. I actually wrote a book about it, it geared towards Americans, and it's called Little Book of Big Reasons to Love America. And it's the whole idea is to sort of tell some stories and say, hey, there's something here in this country that's valuable that you can lose if you don't know that it's valuable. And let me
Mhm.
tell you a little bit about the a little contrast here from growing up in three different places that were dictatorships, and 70% of the people on the planet now live under an authoritarian regime. So
Mm,
this is not just ancient history, this is today. So
right.
I think
No,
it's important to have that perspective.
absolutely. And I was wondering if you would be willing to share maybe one of your reasons um, for loving America from the perspective of someone who was not born here and was not raised here.
I think honestly, the number one is freedom. It's just being able to choose. That is the number one. It's truly a free country, you know? And you can sort of add, yes, but sure, okay, there's no perfect place on earth, right?
Right.
But if you're able to speak your mind and not be arrested for it, if you're able to move from city to city, county to county, from state to state freely with an amazing infrastructure, with a great middle class everywhere. If you're able to get a job, most people, the vast majority of people, can easily get a job. You might not be a millionaire or happy with
Right.
your job, but you have a job. And there are
Right.
places on earth where like South Africa right now is collapsing. It's 40% unemployment, 40,
Wow.
as opposed to 4 to 6 in America. We don't
Right.
even understand the how that impacts life, right? And
Mhm.
it's the ability to choose to start a business, to not fear for your life, to not fear that somebody will take your business away from you, you
Mhm.
know, all of those things. It's a remarkable country. I mean, just don't understand how abnormal this is, you know.
Well, as somebody who's lived on both sides of,
Yeah, yeah,
the way the Soviet Union versus Russia, you've seen both and
yeah.
you've experienced and lived both. And now you are here in the US. So how did you end up here in the US after your
Well, I married an American, and I had no intention of leaving Russia because I had a sort of a big name there, right?
mhm.
And uh, she moved to Russia. She was in Los Angeles at the time, and we had our two of our daughters there, and she learned Russian, and we were supposed to, stay there. And
Mhm.
her health was just not, vibing with the climate. The climate is terrible in Russia, and she has some autoimmune issues, and it just her health was getting worse and worse. And eventually, we just realized this is unsustainable, and we have to make a move. So we made the move, and basically, I had to sort of start over, go to a place where no one knows or cares who I am. So that's what I
Oh,
did.
yeah. Well, talking about that, the reinvention that you mentioned in your bio,
Yeah,
is yeah, going from a place where everybody knows you
yeah.
to a place where nobody knows you. And so,
hmm
so, what was that like, that transition then?
it was a humbling experience. I was prepared for it. I was at peace with it. But it was definitely, you had to relearn things. But I remembered what it meant to be nobody. In the sense of a public person and not being a public
Hmm.
person. So I remember that I had no problem with that. It was not an ego thing. It was really more of okay, how do I find my way in a place where I have an accent. I'm not from here. I don't have any sort of inherent advantages here.
Hmm.
How do I create something that I feel that fulfills me, but also provides for my family, all of those things. And that's the beauty of America, is that I was able to do that. just that freely. I've started three different companies, two nonprofits. I've planted churches, and I was able to do this freely with never, never, ever experiencing any oppression, any interference from anybody. And I'm grateful for that. It's not normal that you're
Yeah.
able to do that.
Yes, yes. Thank you for bringing that perspective as well about our beautiful country. But I want to take a step backwards just a moment because I want to talk about you and your wife. I was reading on your website that you had a long distance relationship for a while.
Yeah, I met
And
her in LA. I was speaking at a conference, and then I honestly immediately saw a connection, like immediately,
mhm,
and we went on a date, sort of a half date because it was like quick, and then a full date, a few hours, and then I had to fly back. And I said, I'm gonna write to you. I'm gonna call you from New York. I was spending a few days in New York
mhm,
with my mom and my sister, who my sister lived out in Connecticut at the time. And so I was hanging out there, and I called her every day. And then I moved, went back to Moscow. And at the time, this was like before Skype even. It was like dial-up, right? Like you couldn't really call much,
yeah.
it's like ancient times. And I emailed her every day, and we emailed back and forth every day until she moved there. And we would go on these cyber chats, remember the
Mhm.
and we would chat every Saturday. So that was our cyber date. And yeah, so we wrote to each other every day. So it's almost like an old-timey thing, only for for the 90s, right? So
Yes.
email.
And now Skype doesn't even exist anymore.
Exactly. That's crazy. Yes.
It's crazy to
Yes.
think about. Yes.
Yeah.
And if I understand correctly, you kept all of
We
these
do.
emails,
Yeah.
these letters,
Yeah,
and that just
we have 300 plus
wow.
emails, and we
Wow.
keep them in a box, and then we sort of take them out for our anniversary, and we just read a few of them to each other.
Oh, well, that melts this romantic's heart.
Thank you.
Oh. So, okay, so you moved to America and are looking for something to benefit your family and to
Yeah.
provide for your family. And I think you mentioned startups, you mentioned nonprofits. So, are you still doing those things today, or how are you thriving now here in America?
I am yes, I'm actually doing too much. I'm trying to sort of narrow it down to one thing. So I'm very curious and passionate, so I end up being distracted, which I think there's a plus, there's a pro to that and a con to that. And the con to that is diluted effort, diluted results, right?
Right, yes.
So I am now focused specifically on two things. I have a digital media company called Third Drive Media, and then I have a coaching program. It's a high performance coaching, so it's a coaching program for professionals who want to grow and excel in their careers.
Oh, that's what I agree with what you said though about dividing
Yeah, yeah,
dividing and diluting. Yes, I've been
yes.
guilty of that myself, and I'm working on that with my son right now, who has probably 1,000,007 different creative ideas to do.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard. It's hard for a creative to narrow their focus. It really
Yes,
is.
yes, it is. So I I would like to you to, if you wouldn't mind, sharing some. Well, you already shared some of the beauty. Because I like to focus on beauty. A lot of times when we have trauma and
Hmm.
tragedy in our lives, I think the human nature is tends to focus on the negative and the why me or the problems that we have. But you have already shown us some of the beauty of coming to America, the beauty of reinventing yourself.
Hmm.
And so I'm not sure I need to ask you about the beauty, but if there was somebody listening today who um, needs to reinvent themselves for some reason, a dream has fallen away, or there's circumstances in their lives that they need to start over. What would you want to say?
Well, I would say, especially if you're talking, I know that your audience is there to really learn about trauma and how to deal with it, right? That's a sort of a thread of your podcast.
Right.
You know what I find in my when I coach and mentor people, what I help them find oftentimes is that there's a treasure in the trauma. And and by that I don't mean sort of poetically or if you can find it, if you understand the purpose of it all, which is all true,
Mhm.
if you see God's hand in it, which is all true. I mean practical sources of being in the world and impacting the world and serving more people in more places in more ways. I find that mining your trauma for an unfair advantage in your career is like the most overlooked potential out there.
Okay. Yeah.
Because most of the things that make us distinct in a positive way are actually rooted in some traumatic experiences in the past. So if you don't make that connection, you can't really reframe it. You're missing. Not only are you missing out, but the people who you would serve otherwise are missing out as well.
I think that's an excellent point. And I know that I've talked to a few people who have specifically used the trauma they've experienced
Absolutely.
to
Hmm.
serve others in that exact same
Yeah. Yeah.
vein or that exact same
There's
industry.
always I've yet to meet anyone who doesn't have something there that is untapped. That if when we unearth it, it becomes an unfair advantage in their career. They become more effective, more successful, make more money. 100%. I believe that.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I agree. So I'm going to put the link to your book in
Hmm.
our show notes. But I also want to ask you, where can people find you to learn more about you and what you do, your coaching, um, your
Well,
media company?
if you are well, the media company is thirddrivemedia.com. That's the media company. So if you're own a business and you want some brand strategy, media, that kind of thing, you can check it out. The coaching is exponential.life. So exponential is spelled without the E, exponential.life. And and it's not for everybody, right? So you have to be ready to do some really serious work, and that's going to change your life. But if you feel like, I'm not ready for something that serious, that intense, but I do find what Christian is saying valuable to me. I think the best place for that is my newsletter. It's a twice a week newsletter. You can sign up for free. You can upgrade to paid if you'd like, but it's a weekly newsletter on the things that we just talked about. Essentially, I focus on inner mastery, how to really change your mindset, your how do you go from anxious to creative, joyful, peaceful, and then outer impact, which I think follows naturally from inner mastery. And then the newsletter is christianrayflores.com. You can go find, there's a lot of stuff there that is actually quite valuable, I think.
Wonderful. Well, I think that you've given us a lot of valuable nuggets and things to think about, especially as, again, as us Americans have this unheard of, I think that was one of the words that you used,
Mhm.
type of living environment that we just don't know and may not appreciate what we have.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so I thank you for that because that is a gift. So I
Thank you.
really
Thank you.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I wrote the book because I felt that I owed it to as a gesture of gratitude towards the country that has been just incredibly welcoming to me as an immigrant.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time that you've given us today and the treasures from the trauma that you shared with us. And I just look forward to getting to know you. I'm going to sign up for your newsletter.
Please do. Please do.
And I look forward to getting to know you a little bit more that way. So thank
Thank
you
you.
again for your time, Christian.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me.
Christian's journey is incredible. As I mentioned in the episode, I used to think that my living in multiple places before I was 6 was both daunting and impressive. But in reality, what I experienced pales in comparison to Christian's early life. He lived through conditions that most of us here in America never think about, much less encounter. We have people in this country who complain about wearing uniforms or working long shifts. But as Christian pointed out, here in America, most people who want a job can get a job. And that is something he knows all too well after living in Russia as a pop star, where everyone knew who he was, to moving to America, where he had to reinvent himself. And that's one of the beauties of this country. Anyone can reinvent themselves. We have that freedom here. We can make choices about where to submit job applications, what types of companies we can create, and in what states we want to reside. It takes resilience. We are trauma survivors. We are no longer trauma victims. Christian shared that we need to mine the treasure in our trauma. That's what moves us from living as a victim to moving through survival and coming out as a thriver on the other side. So, what can you mine from your traumas? What is the lesson or lessons that you learned that would be so beneficial to someone coming along behind you? Something to think about this week. And don't forget to sign up for Christian's newsletter and pick up a copy of the little book of Big Reasons to Love America. For those of us who grew up here, we might just learn something new. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and to make your words warrior words. God bless.